Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Ahlul Bayt Live on Ahlul Bayt TV, and in this program it's going to be a special program to discuss the tragic execution of Sheikh Nimr. As many of you will be aware, there have been many campaign organisations or groups involved in campaigning for his release over the last few months, and we have had guests on as well who are in touch with his family and have been getting feedback from the family. Of course, we know that his son, Ali, is still also imprisoned. So tonight we're going to, again, in order to raise some awareness about the person of Sheikh Nimr, we're going to be discussing who he is and his history. What did he campaign for, and what does this execution actually mean for the future policy of the Saudi regime? What can we expect in the future months to come? Please do feel free to call in with any questions or comments. Inshallah, at the end of the show, we'll ask you to do a Al-Fatiha for Sheikh Nimr. I'm going to welcome my guests, Sister Ruhi Rizvi and Afreen Rizvi as well, who have been involved in campaigning. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Thank you for giving us your time. And first of all, Sister Ruhi, I just wanted to ask again, so the viewers will be aware of your involvement in campaigning for his release before we actually talk about.
Yeah, we've actively, as part of the Free Sheikh Nimr campaign for the last 3.5 years, constantly campaigned through various means, through visual protests and Downing Street petitions, lobbying our MPs. Mm-hmm. It's been quite constant.
Right.
You know, we haven't left any time where we've not focused on his release.
Yeah, and Afreen as well. You've been involved as well. I mean, how is it among again the young Shia who are of your generation? How have they been involved, and what does it mean for them?
Initially, when Sheikh Nimr was shot and arrested in July 2012, that's when we had our first set of protests outside the Saudi embassy in London. Yeah, that first protest, and I actually remember all of it, majority of the people that came were like young teenagers and youth from like university. So it wasn't the older generation that was present, it was the younger generation. And constantly after that, whenever we had a vigil or a demonstration, it was the same people, the same age groups. It was the youth that were attending and showing their support. And then slowly they started making their appearance on social media as well. So there was a big uproar on social media, again by the youth as well, because that's the kind of age they are at when they're using social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. So the youth involvement has always been completely spectacular. And alhamdulillah, it's been both the elder generation and the younger generation coming together to protest.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, because I know that there's been like weekly protests and vigils outside the Saudi embassy as well. And just to, again, for those who might have not been aware, I mean, not everybody is on social media, and actually, interestingly, although I've been aware that although in the mainstream media they've talked about Sheikh Nimr's son being incarcerated, they haven't actually talked about Sheikh Nimr much. So I guess the wider audience is not going to be aware of who he is or what he's been doing.
I think the reason behind that is the fact that Ali Nimr, being his nephew, was the person that was mostly highlighted in the last few months.
Right.
But that's more in relation to his signatures against his execution came first, and obviously then there was an uproar on social media through all other mainstream media and through our parliaments. But I think it was only because there was more awareness, because his papers were signed first for execution.
Right. And just to, again to raise the awareness with people around the world from all the different countries who may be tuning in and may not be so aware, who is he, and what's his background, and what has he campaigned for?
Afreen. Sheikh Nimr is a faith leader. He's a human rights activist, pro-democracy activist. He's a reformer. So he's not only just a cleric for Muslims, but he is a human rights activist like you and I, okay? Yeah. So let's put faith aside for a second. He's literally just speaking out, or spoke out rather, against the injustices within the kingdom. Focusing primarily on the minorities within Saudi Arabia in the eastern province, because they are always targeted and victimized simply for being Shia. And even today, after hearing about the execution, the Saudi regime sent armed forces and tanks into that region of Awamiya and Qatif in Saudi Arabia. And this is what Sheikh Nimr spoke about. He goes, since the minute we're born into an atmosphere of fear and intimidation.
Yeah.
He goes, we're afraid to speak because even we're afraid of the walls. So he was primarily, speaking out against the injustices against the minorities. He was condemning the fact that Jannat al-Baqi has been completely desecrated by the Saudi regime.
Yeah.
So not only was it just about minorities, it was about the way our imams have been treated and everybody buried there, and how the treatment of Shias is just completely absurd within the kingdom. So Sheikh Nimr spoke about everything and anything that the Saudi regime were trying to silence him over.
Right, yeah, which is very brave, because I remember actually meeting some students from Qatif who came over a few years ago, and they were talking about how it is there, about how the Shia can't get any kind of positions of influence, and I think they don't have any of their own mosques. I mean, they've got no Husseinias, they've got no public places to meet, and you definitely, you can't speak out, and even within your own country, if you're getting a job, you have to be in taqiyya, which is kind of strange that this is your own country, but you have to kind of, in order to survive, you can't sort of practice your
basic
deen
human
openly.
rights are all violated out there. They don't have, the basic means that they can actually call anything themselves. Holding on to basic products and things like that, in terms of calling it them for themselves. Is it's not permitted.
Right.
So, names and everything else, everything highlights who they are. In some way, so they, they don't have the basic rights at all.
Yeah, because I remember when these students came over to London, they were going around the Husseinias in London, and they say, we've never seen this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which says a lot.
Yeah,
which
means that they've been actually, for any kind of gathering, they've always had their own homes or little, little places where they can actually hold such gatherings, but something that they can't display openly because they're afraid.
Yeah,
they're really afraid.
So he's been campaigning for many years, and it seems that his whole family is also involved in this campaign. Just to kind of go back to why he was arrested, because I remember around that time there were these protests. Going on. If you can just remind the viewers of why he was arrested.
Yeah, so we had the Arab Spring. Everybody remembers those uprisings that began from December 2011, starting in Tunisia, and then we had Egypt, and then slowly people in Bahrain started standing up against the dictatorship by the Khalifa regime in Bahrain. Now, one important fact to remember is that Sheikh Nimr not only spoke about the minorities in Saudi Arabia, but also about the treatment of minorities in Bahrain, which again is heavily influenced by Saudi Arabia because of the close family relations of the Khalifa regime. So when the Bahrain uprising began, there was forces that were being sent from Saudi Arabia to Bahrain, and this is exactly what Sheikh Nimr spoke about, about army and forces being used to repress people and their voices, and the crackdown to the people of Bahrain was absolutely brutal in the sense that they were being attacked with tear gas and rubber bullets, and children as young as 5 and 9 were being shot at, and the pictures were coming up on social media. So it was absolutely brutal. And then people in Qatif especially started rising up and speaking out as well in July 2012. That's when Sheikh Nimr was shot 4 times in the leg. He completely passed out. There was pictures of him completely filled with blood. And it's saddening because 3 years later he had those bullets removed, since he was shot in 2012. And not only that, he was targeted by the specialized criminal court, apparently for inciting terrorism and sectarianism and havoc in the kingdom. So since the beginning, Sheikh Nimr was targeted.
Right, thank you. And we just got a call on the line. We're just going to take this. Assalamu alaikum.
I referred to you in the daily program, and I think we are condemned to this, the Sheikh Nimr, and inshallah this is our voice to raise for some channels, even from Pakistan or some channels, the commander of Al-Qaeda, they were punished like this, but this is the wrong, so that's the good voice through our channels.
Right.
And we condemn to the the government to.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So the brother was saying that it's important on these channels to actually mention it in order to, again, like we were saying, raise the awareness. And also, yes, I mean, there are many other media channels that are probably, as you say, depicting him as a terrorist.
What we must remember is that in line with the 46 other people that were executed this morning, or since in the last 2-3 days, they had a list of some of the members that they claimed to be Al-Qaeda.
Right.
Yeah. In one of those names, obviously, Sheikh Nimr and another 3 other young people who are under the age of 17 were also in that same list.
Right.
What seems to have happened now is across all the mainstream media is that Sheikh Nimr is being highlighted as being a terrorist.
Yeah.
Or has undergone execution for that reason.
Right.
Well, we must make it very, very clear here, and it must be done in a way where we actually explain that list does not carry out does not carry on with people who are only Al-Qaeda, but very, very innocent people who were only there at protests and carried an innocent voice and only spoke for freedom and spoke the truth. Yeah. So they've mixed the list up with Al-Qaeda members, and they've actually depicted it as Sheikh Nimr and those other young people, very innocent people under the age of 17, as being terrorists.
Yeah, and this is something we can continue to discuss. We've just got another caller on the line, which we're going to take. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, sisters.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for calling in.
My heart goes out to the whole family of Ayatollah, his family, and all the other brothers who got martyred today by the brutal government of Saudi Arabia. Well, they should take their name off, and they should change the name on the flag. Instead of putting a kalma on that, they should put the biggest terrorist organization in this present moment in this world. What we need to do ourselves is we need to unite together, all of us, right, and do some sort of banners where we can put them on the buses or something like that, wherever town we live in or city we live in, all our business people should get together and donate money and then put these sort of banners and flags onto the buses where we can protest the brutal regime government of Saudi Arabia who are funding these terrorist groups all in Middle East by backing of America and the backing of the Israeli government. And look, today Obama announced that they're going to let Turkey go into Syria, right? That's another plot just to divert their ideology and their regime, what they're doing brutally to the Muslim world, and that's their hidden agenda. Because Russia is bombing the right places in the right target, America does not like what is happening because they had a different ideology and different way of thinking. And this is my answer. We should all get together now and do something which is positive instead of all talking about it.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion about, raising awareness, and inshallah later in the program we'll be talking about what we can do. It reminds me actually of what has been suggested. It reminds me of what has happened in New York with actually on the underground, different groups have been financing. Obviously there's been anti-Muslim posters on the underground, but then there's been pro-Muslim posters on the underground. Do you think that's effective, or are there other?
I think it's an effective medium. I think there's a lot more that can be done to raise awareness. And I think even with Islamophobia in the UK, we've been doing quite well in terms of raising awareness. I think social media plays a very very important role in respect of that. And I think mainstream media will never cover anything that will highlight the positivities of the Muslims. But I think we do need to take a big stand, and we need to make sure that there is some kind of effective medium that we can all use to either unite all Muslims together, but also with everybody else through interfaith too.
Yeah, interfaith is also important. We've just got another caller that has just come in, I think. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, sisters.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for calling in.
Now, this discussion naturally, I mean, it has to be taken very, very seriously. I mean, it's heartbreaking what has happened in Saudi Arabia. I mean, those people have been doing this thing for such a long time, and the mainstream media is completely silent about it. Now, the main thing, what I don't understand, I mean, if you see all the terrorism is being financed by Saudi Arabia, they are the mother of the terrorism. Everywhere, whether it's in Europe or in America or in Asia, these are the people who are behind it. And they've been proved that all those people are from Saudi Arabia. And I cannot understand why world is not saying anything about it. Secondly, I mean, Saudi Arabia on its own cannot do anything. Only the intellect or the brains which they can work is to build a toilet which is made of gold and shit in there. Sorry, excuse my language. That is how clever these people are. Secondly, now where are we going wrong? I think I was there today at the Saudi embassy, and I think the message what we are delivering is not really proper, because either it's in Arabic or in Urdu or in other languages, we want to bring this awareness to the local public, because these people are the ones who we need. We don't need anybody else, to be honest about it. I think if we are even the slogans in Arabic or in Urdu or something like that, and people who are passing by it, I mean, they don't understand, to be honest about it. And I spoke to a few people who joined the process, and they were asking what exactly the problem. I mean, I explained it to them, and they said, "My God, I mean, this is what has happened." You see, it's a shocking thing. I think our message is the thing. We really need to work extremely hard to make aware of it. In Europe, I think there are people who will understand the thing. And I'm sure that people are really, you know, they will be heartbreaking things to see something like that. And Saudi Arabia, I think it's only petrol money is being bought. The whole Europe is bought by the petrol money. Is money such an important thing? Then we should abandon the human rights completely. Why are we having the human rights? They are the biggest people who are talking about the human rights. And when it comes to this sort of a tragedy, they are completely silent about it.
Yeah, that's
so, Karan, thank you very much, sister, to give me a chance to myself.
No, thank you for calling in, and I think this is what is coming through, that which is always the same. It's a bit the same with the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, trying to get this message out to the wider media, and how that can be done effectively. I mean, I notice sometimes with the julus is people think it's a protest and they don't understand what it's about. But I guess that involves, I mean, you can talk about social media. I guess it also involves having contacts in mainstream media. So, Staruhi, I mean, you were talking about having contacts with interfaith groups, and then maybe, so it's about networking, maybe.
It is about networking. I think we have to make, we have to have one message that goes across to the wider community across the UK or globally. But it has to be a message, just as you said, Imam Hussein's message that went out to, that crosses what element looked at. What we're trying to say here is that, by using all the forms of media, we need to be expressing ourselves exactly what Saudi regime has been doing in the past, what the historical background is, and how we can actually come away from that, and what other methods or tools we can use to express ourselves quite openly.
Thank you. And We'd again remember the martyrdom of Sheikh Nimr today, and to consider again the impact that is going to have, and obviously bearing in mind what kind to be looking at in 2016. I know that many people are obviously facing this year with trepidation, but inshallah we're going to be thinking about some strategies to take. We're just about to go to break. Inshallah we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Ahlul Bayt Live on Ahlul Bayt TV, and we are discussing the martyrdom of Sheikh Nimr and thinking about the repercussions and what we're going to be looking at for the coming year with regard to the bigger picture and what is happening in the geopolitical scenario. So do feel free to call in with any questions or comments. But Sister Afreen, Rizvi just had a couple of, you've got a couple of updates about what's going on with regard to, you mentioned the bodies.
Yeah, somebody just highlighted that Sheikh Nimr's family have requested for the bodies of the martyrs, but the Saudi regime has refused to give the bodies.
Right.
So that's the, as you can see, they're continuously provoking people to give the bad response. And at the moment, Qatif is literally on fire. There's a lot of, they've gone completely...
havoc.
Yeah, it is a havoc. And even in Tehran, the consulate is, they've also put that on fire, also in Mashhad as well.
Right.
There's pictures coming from Bahrain where, the roads are on fire. So this is exactly what was predicted. The family of Sheikh Nimr said that if you do go ahead with this execution, you're literally stabbing yourself in the foot. And as you can see today, that's exactly what's happened, where countries are... many governments are, issuing out statements. People are protesting globally. Even now, there's people organising protests in Texas, in India, in Peshawar, in Pakistan. Even in literally like war-torn countries, people are still protesting against the execution because it was brutal. And not only was Sheikh Nimr only executed, but 3 young children as well. Gosh. And that goes completely against, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that Saudi Arabia has signed. Yeah. So
why were the children executed? Do you know, or they were just sort of getting put under a label?
Again, for participating in protests.
Right.
And ironically, the weirdest thing is that Saudi Arabia heads the UN Council of Human Rights, and one of the main articles is that they have the freedom to protest and demonstrate. So it completely goes against their own articles that they've signed for.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother bizarre thing of Saudi Arabia heading the Council of Human Rights, and I think some deal was done even with the British government of giving them support for that, and then you've got this double talk of our government sort of saying...
Absolutely, which is why what angers me most is the fact that when we had the gentleman who was found with alcohol in his boot, and he faced lashes literally a few weeks ago.
Right.
David Cameron did everything in his power to release him, and he was back home within weeks.
Right.
But we've been campaigning for the last 3-4 years, and it's fallen on deaf ears. My anger streams back to 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That, petitions and lobbying the parliament and everything that we possibly could do has been done, including raising issues at the Human Rights Council, and that's fallen on deaf ears too.
So that indicates that, I mean, obviously we know there's so much going on behind the scenes, and what we see is not what is actually really going on. So all of this talk about human rights, and then of course pressure on Muslims, it's always like the politicians who are turning around and saying, you Muslims have to sort yourselves out and eradicate this extremism in your communities, but they're the ones who are actually supporting those governments that are
absolutely
sort of funding
it's a double stance. It's very hypocritical, because in one way we're told that the UK British government focuses on human rights and it believes in democracy, and at the same time it's got very close ties with a regime that is so brutal, that seems to get away with their own royal family that has mishaps and mistreatment of humans across the globe, and that is fine to do so. So I don't see why we can sit comfortably in our homes and feel that the UK government is acting on our with our best interest, because it definitely is not the case.
Yeah, and I wonder also, well, I mean, yeah, like you say, there's been petitions to Parliament and you know, appealing to the government is just like falling on deaf ears. And as you say, then in that case, maybe it is like you've been talking about social media. Okay, government's not listening, so we just have to get the message out to people on the ground and get them aware, because you don't see a lot of articles about Sheikh Nimr, you know, on the mainstream media.
Initially, what we did organise was a Twitter storm where we got the hashtag Free Nimr going. So people, and we said, look, at a specific time, let's all use this hashtag Free Nimr. I think it was 8 p.m. UK time, so that people globally are awake at that time. They can, you know, set up a couple of tweets, and what happens is it basically starts trending, and people start to become a lot aware about the hashtag.
Right.
So we use the Free Nimr hashtag, and a lot of people were like, well, who is Nimr? And then we started sending out information packs about who Sheikh Nimr is on social media. And honestly, the next day there were so many articles written by IB Times, the Business Insider, The Economist, BBC about Sheikh Nimr. Wow. And then very recently, I'd say about 2 months ago, we did another Twitter storm using the hashtag Ali Muhammad al-Nimr, being the nephew of Sheikh al-Nimr, who was arrested at the age of 17. And a lot of people didn't even know who he was, but the following day, there was hundreds of articles about him, about how Saudi Arabia imprisons children, sentences human rights activists and political prisoners and whatnot. So we, alhamdulillah, it was actually a very, very successful Twitter campaign that we used, because it was from that day onwards that a lot of people were talking about Sheikh Nimr and his nephew and other detainees.
Yeah. That is some good news, because it shows that it is actually possible to have direct impact on the media. We've just got another caller coming in right now. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. It's Ajad from London.
Welcome. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, first I would like to pay my condolences to the entire Muslim Ummah on the martyrdom of Sheikh Nimr. This Saudi and the Zionist regime, they are in collusion with the and partners to they have this satanic plan to suppress the awakening which happened in 2011, and Sheikh Nimr was the just one person. He's shaken the foundations of the royal family, which nobody could do in Saudi Arabia for the last 80 years since the rule came, since the Saudi ruler Al Saud started in 1925. That one person, Sheikh Nimr, he was a sole single person on his own. He took the stand, and that stand is enough to trigger. He is no longer with us today, but this will definitely lead to the downfall, because all these oppressive powers like Umayyads, Abbasids, and all the previous satanic empires, they are being deceived by the shaitan that you will remain in power. You can still go and fight the Haqq, but eventually that's a deception by the shaitan, and eventually it results in the downfall. So whatever they are doing, this is the weakness. What are the steps they are doing, sending the troops and all these to the families there, which they are not there to fight. Even the brother of Sheikh Nimr, he said that he appealed for the peaceful protest and no more bloodshed, but still they are sending that because to bully and to show their strength, but it's not their strength. Rather, they're just foolishness. All of us, we know that how much, what kind of king Salman is, that he can't even remember his name. So these are the policies. Just last point on what is our role now, because to carry the message forward. That's very important, that we need to highlight for youth that we need to overcome our differences, whether it's ethnic, where it is, and it has to start from the families, because right now what is happening that within the families there are differences, and we sometimes we not tolerate each other, but we have to start from the families, then we have to take it forward to the mosque, imam bargahs, and also include the other faiths as well, because nowadays what happens that the person who understands what is right and wrong, they can easily judge, and then they accept the message of truth. So that's what we have to do, and to make sure that we get the priorities correct, because this is as Ayatollah Khamenei said, that we are at a critical juncture in the history. So and the letter sent by the Ayatollah Khamenei to the youth in the West it states that to get the priorities correct, and for example, we're not saying that we just focus on just one thing, religion or the human rights, but to purify self, correct, and that way we'll become brave and we'll be able to stand up to these oppressive governments in coming time and do something practical and to carry the message forward. That's my message. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for your message, and thank you for calling in as well. Yes, so again, it's actually I was going to ask about what's the impact that there has been on the family, because we've been talking about the impact in countries. Because I wasn't immediately aware until a few hours ago that he has been executed. So what time was it, and how is the family at the moment?
Well, we did hear from the brother of Sheikh Nimr this morning, and in one account he's actually mentioned that Sheikh Nimr would want, that things are kept.
Yeah.
There's peacefully, that there's no violence entailed after his death. We also know that he also wrote a letter to his mother before he was martyred this morning, in which it clearly highlights the fact that he talks about making her understand, giving her some kind of understanding in relation to the things that we should accept from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in respect of future, and something that is foreseeable in respect to our own wishes. That whatever is granted from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that is ordained for us, and that we must allow that to happen, and that certain events are, for us they may not be foreseeable. But if they do come by, then we have to accept them.
I mean, it seems that it's interesting that it's a huge risk to stand up to the regime. We know sort of how people have to be so careful about what they say and do. So he took that stand knowing he must have taken that stand.
On numerous occasions. If you just go on YouTube and just type in Sheikh Nimr's speech, for example, you will find snippets of how brave he was, and he was openly saying that we will not be silenced and we will continue to resist against oppression. We will not allow the Saudi regime and other tyrannical forces to hold us down and to not let us practice our faith. He spoke out so bravely, with so much valor and bravery. It literally reminds you of our Ahlul Bayt, because they did the same thing. They were persecuted and they were harassed and they were mistreated by people of their time. Exactly the same thing happened to Sheikh Nimr.
Absolutely. I think spiritually you get to a stage where you understand that some things are or can be done by yourself. And if you don't take that moment or opportunity to do so, then you will be met by more, harm. I think there comes a stance in life where you actually recognize that you are perhaps the person who has to be the one who has to speak out against oppression and injustice. But at the same time, we must recognise that has been the message of Imam Hussein all along. When Lady Zainab Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when she speaks Yazid, that was her moment.
Yeah.
So we all have a moment in time where we need to be speaking. My message to anyone who's watching the program today is that same fact, that we need to be speaking out, so as long as it's the truth.
Yeah.
And the more of us that we speak, that more of us that does stand up and speak the truth allows an understanding of people to congregate together and be one and united against brutal regimes across the globe.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's also not something to just take for granted, because we hear that we said we need to be united, we need to take action, but actually, I have heard from some community leaders, around the world, that they say that unfortunately the Shi'i communities where they are not so active. We might think that in the larger cities that, well, this is how it is. Everyone is involved in something and campaigning for something. But there are towns out there and cities out there where people are not quite so active, just living their daily life. And I've spoken to also, followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in the past who said that there was a time where I was just living my life. That's what they say. I was just living my life. I wasn't aware of that I need to get involved in anything. So it isn't just empty words. It's actually saying that everyone counts and everyone has a part to play.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that we've been taught by the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. 1400 years ago, Imam was saying, standing up for the truth, and die in the name of honor and dignity and everything else. It's not just a message for 1400 years ago. It's a message for today. We have to live our lives as if we are also leading the same lives. If we are to say to ourselves that we are the supporters of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, then we have to lead the life in this world. And recognize ourselves as the followers of the Ahlul Bayt today.
Also, just something interesting that the caller said earlier is that Sheikh Nimr has had some impact with regard to weakening that grip of the regime. Because we might have the impression that yes, he was standing up, yes, he was speaking, yes, he was campaigning, but what impact has he had? Because they seem, the regime still seems to be enforced.
What is interesting is that although some people say that whatever he's saying isn't impacting anyone, if you look and if you analyze the climate in Saudi Arabia very carefully, there's a lot of people, not just Shia Muslims, that have started to stand up against the Saudi regime, but also Sunni Muslims and Christians as well, because their rights are also being usurped in the kingdom. You just don't hear about it. And the same thing happened in Bahrain as well. More and more people started standing up after Sheikh Nimr started preaching and speaking out against the brutality. And if you look today, we've got the Saudi regime sending in, deploying forces into Awamir. So clearly they're fearing what's going to happen, because the family of Sheikh Nimr did highlight that if you do execute Sheikh Nimr, the repercussions are not going to be pleasant at all. And I'm going to be honest with you, I mean, the judge of Sheikh Nimr, who was overlooking the trial, he's a brutal individual. He sentenced a 9-year-old to execution. Okay, so I don't even want to go into the whole unfairness of the trial, because that in itself is very upsetting. But the judge sentenced a 9-year-old. So deep down, I knew it's not going to be easy for Sheikh Nimr. But you had Iran saying that they will get involved if needs be, and that there's Ayatollah Ghani said they're going to regret it if they do make a bad move. We had Hezbollah as well. We had leaders in Iraq, including Ayatollah Sistani. So, I mean, today, waking up to the fact that Sheikh Nimr was executed, for me, it was heartbreaking, because I didn't expect it. I genuinely thought that Saudi Arabia are going to pardon Sheikh Nimr. Even though he hasn't done anything, I actually believed that they wouldn't go ahead with it. And even today, the brothers are Sheikh Nimr's family. I don't know what they're going through at the moment. I know there was a few tweets from the brother, but since then it's been quiet.
Yeah, I'm sure they've been completely just occupied with, but as you say, they're not occupied with the janazah, because the bodies haven't been released. So that must be, again, you can't imagine how that feels, that your family members have been executed and you can't bury them. And also, of course, there must be concerns for their safety as well.
Initially, when the brothers used to tweet about the trial and the case of Sheikh al-Nimr, they were arrested. So there was one time Jafar al-Nimr, one of the brothers of Sheikh al-Nimr, he tweeted, "I'm currently in a cell because I've been arrested for tweeting." Then again, Muhammad al-Nimr, the other brother of Sheikh al-Nimr, he also highlighted, "I was arrested for a few hours and detained because I was tweeting." So they are living in fear. The family is fearful because they don't know who's going to be next. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Also, just thinking we're thinking about the repercussions in terms of global. I mean, you're talking about the Iran and Iraq and Lebanon, but also putting this in a wider context of what we've seen going on in the last year with, like Saudi Arabia recently, what was it? They actually praised the Nigerian government for cracking down on Islamic movement
of Nigeria
march and said that yes, you've done well to stand up to terrorists. So this seems to be, again, it's all part of this game that's being stoked up.
It's very global. The situation with even at the moment Boko Haram and the military, and they speak the same voice at the same time. The same messages are going out that they're opposing the Nigerian Muslims. So it's not even sectarian in Nigeria at the moment. But over the last few weeks, the massacre and everything that's happened with the Sheikh Zakzaki's family, that's in itself extremely bad news for everyone. It's devastating, but it just seems that they aren't just making those stances by themselves, that they are being led. What we need to understand is it by the Zionist regime? Is it by the Saudi regime? Who is behind these plots? So it seems to be a same kind of reverberation everywhere, where the Muslims are just kind of being suppressed or victimized or incarcerated for whatever.
We've just got another caller on the line, which we're going to take. Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Hello.
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 Hello, you're through to the studio.
No, this is Father Frank Gilly.
Hello, welcome to the studio. Thank you for calling in.
My pleasure.
And what was the point that you wanted to make?
Well, I attended just 3 hours ago the demonstration outside the Saudi embassy to protest against the atrocious judicial murder of Sheikh Nimr. I'm an Anglican priest, and I'm very fond of Muslims, but I'm also very fond of justice. I'm very fond of righteousness. And it seems to me that the killing, the beheading of this very good man, this peaceful man, this man of non-violence, is an insult to the idea of fairness, the idea of justice, and we should be very vocal in demonstrating and convey a message of indignation to the Saudis.
I was going to ask you as well, is it possible for, Anglican priests or members of the church to also spread this awareness among Christians, or is there an awareness among Christians at the moment of what's going on?
Well, I'm committed to religious dialogue. It's one of my major commitments. It's been for years. Now, I'm a bit of, I would call myself a turbulent priest, a bit of a radical. The Church of England, the mainline Anglican Church, is a little bit, how should I say, afraid of rocking the boat.
Right.
But as far as I have a voice and can convey it online, if I can convey it personally, I certainly think that as Christians, we have in common with Muslims a concern for justice, a concern for saying no to tyranny, and there is
the action of the Saudi regime has been specially designed to inflame people. They've really sort of thrown down a gauntlet to any right-thinking person, because they must have known that their action would cause an uproar. So maybe they really want to cause a conflagration. And it would be, I think, if it was like that, it is very short-sighted of the House of Saud, because they are standing on the edge of the precipice. There are too many people who are tired of the Saudi, or well, not so much of ordinary Saudi people who probably just wish for justice like anybody else, but for the oligarchy, for the Saudi princes, or the billionaires who live in ways which contradict the message of Islam anyway, and who are carrying out acts of tyranny.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Father Frank Gelly, and obviously, hopefully, more Anglicans will also be aware of what's going on, because I think it's not always easy to strike up a dialogue with churches as well. So thank you for your call, and we've just got about a minute till we go to break. But again, I think that's the interesting point, that the mainstream church here, or the Anglican church here, is afraid to speak out, really.
But I think what should be actually done about this is the fact that the message is about truth and rights, human rights.
Yeah.
Human rights should be something of an agenda that we should all strike with, negotiate with. And it just seems that we recognise human rights, and yet everybody seems to see it in a very different light.
Yeah, true.
Regardless of what faith we belong to, human rights is something for every one of us.
Yeah.
And I think, regardless of that, everyone should be able to exercise their freedom of that too.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And we're just about to go to break. Again, we'll be back, inshallah, in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Ahlul Bayt Live, where we are discussing the martyrdom of Sheikh Nimr and thinking about, in this part of the programme, what action can be taken, what effective action can be taken in practical terms. Also, do feel free to call in with any suggestions or comments or thoughts as well of where we are going from here, inshallah. So we have, obviously, Sister Rohida, are these protests going on? But again, thinking about how we can actually make real change, because sometimes, again, you feel, I'm sure there is some impact from protests, but obviously a lot of people say that, okay, you're standing outside the Saudi embassy and they're probably just in there having a cup of tea, and you feel that there's just...
It makes no difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Somebody approached me today with the same question as to, why are we doing it on this day, on a weekend? The embassy will be closed. Why is this not being done on a weekday?
Right.
And my answer is, we're not doing enough of them.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, whether they are in there or not in there, we need to make that noise.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of famous people come out with phrases, and one of them that hits me quite well is Malcolm X, and he said that to achieve something positive and raise awareness, you have to make a noise.
Right.
So it's noise that we need to make, regardless. Yeah. We need to hand out leaflets, we need to educate people, we need to raise awareness in ways where people can understand, the issues surrounding Saudi Arabia. They can understand what this royal family that likes to call themselves royal really stand for.
Yeah.
Is it for, does it stand for a very positive means? Is it destructive in ways for Muslims? What kind of agenda it holds? themselves. So it's about educating yourselves, raising awareness. We can't do that without making the noise. Yes, we can lobby our parliaments, we can write to our MPs and constituents, yes, we can sign petitions, but then we all have to be active. How many Muslims are living in the UK right now, in Great Britain? How many people, all they needed to do was click a few buttons to raise awareness in terms of what's actually going on. Are they in agreement with the Saudi government, or are they in a disagreement? Signing a petition doesn't take too long. It takes a few seconds. You know, coming out on the streets, you know, is that not one way of actually raising awareness that your own existence or your purpose of your existence being outside on the pavements outside the Saudi regime, outside the Saudi embassy, does that not speak volumes? You are out there for a reason. Are you recognised for doing so? But you cannot do that unless you raise awareness, use your education. We seem to be people that are now so. We know what's happening on the news. We know that half the news is not there. Media is not our best friend. We know that Muslims are suppressed and oppressed. What we need to be doing is raising that awareness, raising our voices, and making sure that we are heard through whatever means or medium that we have.
Thank you. And we've just got another call coming in on the line, which we're going to take. Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, hello. I'm atheist. I just want to tell you where I'm coming from. Oh.
Welcome.
Yeah, I see. You know what? Let me just get your speaker. Right, let me just tell you where I'm coming from. Now, I've been studying Islam for 6 years, just because of everything that's been going on, you know, in the media, what's happened. And how I see it is all the badness is actually coming from the Salafis, is it the beer dandies, whatever. As I see it, the Sunnis are the main culprits in all the terrorism, in probably 95% of it. Now, let's be fair about this. I mean, you're having a go at Saudi Arabia there, just non-stop, and you know you're praising Iran. But let's talk about what Iran have done. I mean, Iran, you know, they're killing up to 1,000 people a year. Some for homosexuality, for drug offences, for blasphemy. You know, let's be fair about this. There's lots of Islamic states that are using the Quran to justify what they're doing, and you guys, I mean, one of you, the lady on the left, actually said, us Muslims, the word can't come to my head, but you subjugated, you know, all over the world, it's Muslim. But you look at it, it's Muslims against Muslims. Now, it happens, apparently, it's Muslims are killing two Muslims to other. So they're killing just as many Muslims. You're killing each other. Now, you've got to...
You're getting a bit cut off. I was just going to ask you, also, are you aware of the history of the British government with regard to the Muslim world? Because often...
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, and, the Sykes-Picot Agreement and, because also this is how it comes across in the mainstream media.
Let me see if I can move. Look, I don't...
Yeah, you're getting cut off, Mr. Caller. Sorry, your line is not coming through. But thank you very much for calling in. We appreciate your call, and we can understand the points that you're making. And I think that this is what comes across that in the mainstream and with the wider audience. That and perhaps this is something that makes it difficult to campaign, because from the outside it looks like, as the caller was saying, well, that's just a bunch of Muslims killing another bunch of Muslims. So you guys just get on with it. We don't want to have anything to do.
Yeah, what we need to understand is that the mainstream media is giving out certain messages, and people are holding on to them like gospel. What we need to understand is that a lot of people aren't educated to a standard where they can make heads and tails of the whole situation or the global situation or the political situation. What we need to say to people is stop confining yourselves into bubbles. Come out of that. Think outside the box. Think logically about what is happening. Who is setting what agenda? What we're trying to say to people is, there are much more stories that need to be understood historically. What's happened over the last 100 years? Where the British government, where it sets itself, who it's supporting, who's supporting who. I think a lot of information, if people educated themselves or understood the big story, they would really not confine themselves in a space where they feel that everything that whatever the media is saying to them is the truth and the whole truth, because that is not the case.
Yeah, and also this isn't always necessarily about Islam. It looks like it's about Islam, but it's
Can
actually
I just
not.
say, in response to that caller, firstly, we appreciate everything you say, but I think it's very, very important to realise you cannot say it's Muslims killing Muslims, because first and foremost, Saudi Arabia do not represent Muslims, and whatever they do, in my opinion, and I'm sure many people's opinion, is not Islamic at all, considering the fact that they are one of the main sponsors of global terrorism. They're executing innocent human rights activists. They are going against the own teachings of our Quran about speaking out against injustice and whatnot. And I think at this moment of time, when a innocent scholar has been executed and 3 juveniles have been executed, we cannot just focus on what Iran is doing. Iran is a separate government, it's a separate nation. What Iran does is Iran's business. We cannot keep saying, but Iran does this and Iran does that. Today is a day of mourning for many, many people. Somebody suggested that we should make January the 2nd a day called the Nimr Day, for he was executed for doing nothing and committing no crime at all. So I think instead of always just going back on what Iran is doing, what Iran isn't doing, we need to discuss the elephant in the room as opposed to always finding another argument.
That's a good point as well, that you can find these kind of other angles that kind of take people away from the point, and also the point that you made, that actually Saudi's not using the Quran to oppress people. Is actually violating Holy Quran, and it's violating Islamic law. It's not enforcing Islamic law.
What we should be actually focusing on is understanding, leaders such as Ali Salman or Salman Ali in Bahrain. Why is he incarcerated? What's happening with the regime, the Al Saud regime? Why are they so oppressive? Why are there so many injustices? What we should be also looking at is leaders such as Sheikh Zakzaki. Why was there a massacre in Nigeria? What's happening with his family? Why were members of his family killed off? There are questions that need to be answered. A lot of people are confining themselves to whatever BBC says or whatever the mainstream media says. What we're saying today is, look at all of your books, look inside your books, look at history, and see where we are going from there, because a lot of the answers are there.
And also, it's not like we were saying, it's not actually to do with Islam or religion, it's to do with politics, money, oil.
Politics.
We just got another caller on the line, which we're going to take. Slanika.
May I continue?
There's a little bit of a break. Hopefully your line will be clear.
That's clear now?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Assalamu
Walaikum salam.
I want to say, I'm proud to say that I was a Sunni who was also outside the Saudi embassy protesting against the incarceration of Sheikh Nimr. So it's not just Shias who have been active in this. I think people like me have also been active in small ways, I guess, but I think we failed. It's really sad that the Saudis decided to kill the Sheikh. They could have at least given him exile, sent him abroad, like many other countries, just as cruel, perhaps not as cruel as Saudi Arabia, who usually send their dissenters abroad rather than killing them. I wish they had been persuaded to do that. I wanted to raise one important point, I think, which is perhaps missing, and I think which is something that the Pakistanis that are living abroad ought to be doing, which is that the the Saudi and the Gulf states employ between 150 and 200,000 Pakistani mercenaries, almost all of them Sunni, Pakistani army soldiers actually. And they, by the way, bring in a huge amount of money to that very impoverished country otherwise, which is now lacking sort of aid from the United States and elsewhere, because Saudi themselves are getting poorer, so they can't really give them that much money. But they are getting a lot of money from the mercenaries who are killing and looting and pillaging in Bahrain, for example. These Pakistanis are also fighting on the side of the Saudis in Yemen. And I think this is often forgotten. I think Pakistani Shias ought to be honest about that. I mean, particularly people from Punjab, who were also very heavily involved. I don't know if you understand this, but in 1971, the Punjabi region was responsible for the death of 3 million Muslims and hundreds of thousands of rape of women, of Bengali women in Bangladesh, which is not forgotten, by the way. I think it's going to haunt them actually forever. But I really think through you, I'm asking you to ensure that this is highlighted, that these mercenaries are fighting for, these Pakistani mercenaries are fighting for the Saudi regime on all these fronts. By the way, in Pakistan today, by the way, television apparently is telling the population that Sheikh Nimr was an Al-Qaeda operative.
Oh my goodness.
How extraordinary is that? So they're basically fooling their own population. And remember that Pakistan, or what was West Pakistan, is the second largest Shia populated region in the world after Iran. There are 40 million Shias who, by the way, claim that they are suffering genocide, just as the Punjabi Shias and Sunnis in Punjab committed genocide in 1971. In the name, by the way, the 1971 genocide was helped by Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And not only that, they actually called it Islamic Jihad, believe it or not.
Right.
So I think we need to be aware of this fact. As I say, I really pray for Sheikh Nimr, and it's really sad what has happened.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, one point you made, which is very, very important to highlight, which is that actually this is about a particular state, a particular type of state, founded by the British, by the way. You talked about history. Britain founded Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
It's very important to remember, just as Britain founded Israel. And this state has little to do with Islam. And I think it has been used to divide up Muslims. We mustn't allow people like me as Sunni and you as Shia to be divided.
Yeah.
We've not been divided for 1,500 years. How can we be divided by a oil-producing, illiterate nation? You know, how can we be divided by these people? I think we mustn't allow ourselves to be divided.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for taking my call.
No, thank you for calling in, and also again very interesting points that help again to put this pattern into perspective. Looking at the history of the massacre in 1971, and how the same thing then the Saudi regime was calling it Islamic Jihad or Islamic struggle as it's called, when actually it's just a pretext.
Absolutely, and it's quite strange that it always ends up being the Saudi regime in the background all the time. So everything that's happening even now, including the Daesh and everything what they're doing, it has a background to it. People need to start searching and researching as to what role the Saudi regime is playing globally.
Yeah. Thank you. And we've just got another call which we are going to take. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for calling in.
I just wanted to make a point.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about the religion. Any human being, whether he's a Muslim, Christian, Jew, or an atheist, if he was treated in that manner, we as a human being, we must protest and help and voice ourselves. I think sometimes we bring this or people bring this religious thing and just want to come out of it. That's your problem. But that person, even if he was a religious person, he is a human being. He is a fellow human being. The verse in the Quran states clearly, either you are brother in faith or brother in humanity. And I think we have to consider that globally the human beings are one family. We must voice ourselves wherever there is a justice. I think sometimes people play with the religious thing just to come out of the picture, and I think this is completely wrong. I think we are acting here as a human being, and something has happened which is not right. I think the human race should voice and protest against it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and also, I mean, again, the impression that is out there in the mainstream media, like the caller a couple of calls back was saying, that has been spread in the media as well, is that this is Shi'i versus Sunni. But as we know,
it's a faith narrative, and it's not. And I think we need to come off of that and move towards the idea that we need to be united under one banner, and that humanity is more important than in relieving us from oppression and injustices everywhere. I think if we follow the faith narrative, which is openly being narrated to us, and everybody seems to be on that same wagon, I think we need to come off of that and start recognizing that it's an oppression and injustice. These are what's happening, and
politically motivated.
It's politically motivated.
And also that this regime has also oppressed Sunnis within in Arabia and in Pakistan as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's what Sheikh Nimr, was trying to highlight through his protests. It wasn't just about because they lived in Awami or Qatif, and that was the main reason behind his protest. It was about human rights. So it is back down to humanity again.
And that anybody who does speak out against the regime or the government or certain leaders, Sheikh Nimr highlights not just Shia individuals, but they are from that moment onwards victimized and targeted. And just in response to the brother that called highlighting that it's not about religion, I think that's a fundamental point that we're all missing. You do not have to be a Muslim to stand up and speak out against oppression that happens to Muslims. Essentially, you just have to be human, because if something bad was to happen to you, I would be worried about you, and we don't have to share the same beliefs or ideology or anything like that. And again, that goes down to practicalities now about what we need to do, in the sense that unfortunately Sheikh Nimr has been executed. Potentially we could have done a lot more. Some people were afraid to get involved in political discourse. Some people were afraid to get their names on petitions and whatnot. But if we do want to get people's attention, specifically non-Muslims, then we need to attract them effectively. Whether that's on social media, which I think is the biggest platform we can use at this moment in time, or if one of the other brothers mentioned that we need to invite them to our protests, then there needs to be something in place that will not only attract them, but it will be meaningful to them. For example, today I was at the protest outside the embassy, and there was a placard that said, "ISIS is the Yazid of today." And this white British man walked past and he goes, what's a Yazid? Now, he won't know what a Yazid is. I do. So how is that helping him if we're trying to get their attention? So then he goes to me, "Do you support ISIS?" And I was like, no. He's like, "Good. There needs to be more people like you speaking out against ISIS." So what we need to do
But also, that's very risky, because some could have walked past and thought
they support ISIS.
Exactly. And he hadn't asked.
It's a clear message.
I think one other issue we're having is that whenever there are demonstrations or protests, people are chanting in Arabic or Urdu or even Farsi, like today I heard, and that's not what I want. And I keep stressing that it needs to be English, because we need people to know what's happening. But unfortunately, people like to stick to their ways. Now, if a white man was to walk past and I'm chanting Labbaik Ya Hussein, he's going to be really baffled. Now, I can just imagine he's probably thinking, what the hell is going on? We've got ISIS here. So we really need to be strategic now, because not only has an execution taken place, but there's been bloodshed, and we cannot stick to our normal ways and continue chanting in Arabic or Urdu. We need to get people attracted and involved into knowing what we are standing up for.
Very, very important point. I think the most essential important point, in this day and age, really, is the pressing issue of getting this message out effectively, and conveying it in English is the first thing. We just got one more caller, time for one more call, which we're going to take. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. From Peterborough, Mohammed Laka. Subhanallah, your show is brilliant. I just switched the TV on and I read the Saudi Arabia execution Ayatollah Nimr. So what actually happened then? Why was he executed? What did he do?
Well, we said that at the beginning of the show, but I'm sure there'll be many people like you who've just tuned in, and we've just got about 5 minutes. But in short, he was involved in campaigns for human rights in Arabia, and also was trying to highlight the atrocities in Bahrain that were committed in Bahrain, and he was arrested, and then he has been in effect on death row, if you want to call it death row, but awaiting execution, and there have been many protests calling for his release, but the Saudi regime has executed him today along with some others. So that's basically what it is, but inshallah this program should be repeated tomorrow, and also inshallah loaded up on YouTube if you want to see the whole program to become more aware.
As British citizens, as British Muslims in the UK, what can we do? We can write, we can have protests, we can write letters, we can make the MPs aware, but what action can actually be enforced in Saudi Arabia? This practice not be carried out.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
I think it's fundamental that we get our MPs involved, simply because they represent us and we're their constituents. If we were all to collectively write letters to our MPs telling them to reassess the relationship with Saudi Arabia being a tyrannical government that is killing innocent people, if we all collectively do that, because there's thousands of us, even millions of us living here in the UK, it will have an impact. Now, when we first got our MPs involved, there weren't that many people writing letters, unfortunately, because when an early day motion went out where all the MPs had to collectively come together for one cause, only 27 MPs out of the 327 we have spoke out.
Gosh.
Now that's a really pathetic number. So I think collectively we need to get our MPs involved because they represent us. It's their duty to highlight what we are complaining about, what we want them to do. That's the first step. And second step, social media is very, very powerful. Sometimes it doesn't seem powerful, but honestly, it's the best platform we can use in this moment of time.
Okay, thank you very much. And sadly, we've just run out of time, and I wanted to thank Sister Ruhi Rizvi and Afreen Rizvi. Thank you very much, and inshallah we'll have you again in the studio for updates on what's happening. And again, obviously, condolences to the family of Sheikh Nimr today, and appeal to, again, our audience to continue to try to raise awareness in whatever way possible, particularly as one caller just said that out in Pakistan he's been labelled as a supporter of Al-Qaeda, which is very bizarre, but we can expect lots of bizarre things in the world we're living today. So inshallah we will be back again soon. Thank you so much for your calls, and I wish you a good night. Assalamu alaikum.